Stefan again. Welcome to the September user group session. I'm the host this evening, and we have two presentations today. One is the main presentation, pushing the boundaries of Power BI with custom HTML visuals and visual layering, and that's from Cailin Perrie. Now, Cailin is actually, as of today, no longer just a presenter. She's also now an organizer. So actually, thank you, Cailin. You guys might be aware that Rian left Intellect a few months ago. So Intellect has appointed someone to replace him on the organizing committee. As you know, there's Intellect user group and shall we say the SADOR user group. They're not affiliated in any way to those companies, but it's just a way to separate the people involved in organizing it. And so Stefan and Cailin are now involved from the Intellect side, and I'm continue to be involved from the SADOR side. So welcome, Cailin, and thank you in advance.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. All right, today's agenda, I'm busy doing the introduction and the welcome. Then we will go into the main topic. Then we've got Power BI news with my colleague Sia, who is on leave at the moment. He has recorded his content, and we did struggle with that the last time. A couple of months ago, we tried to play back that video, and the audio was very, very quiet. He listened to it. He was basically shouting this time around. So hopefully that will work perfectly. So I'll just play that recording a little bit later on. While we go through it, just some etiquette. We love seeing people's faces. Obviously, when we are online, it's not so easy to do that. But if you're comfortable, please put your video on. However, please mute your audio. Obviously, if you've got questions, unmute yourself. I'm actually only looking at one screen. So if there's Teams chat messages, in fact, Cailin, would you mind just monitoring the Teams chat for us in case there's something there? Or in fact, sorry, no, I'll do that while you're presenting. So we can just tag team it. So while I'm talking now, you can monitor. While you're talking, I'll monitor. How's that? That makes sense. All right, excellent. And then typically, in fact, we've hardly stuck to this this format during this year, and probably for next year we might even just scrap it, because it just seems strange to have a sort of trying to have a sequence and then we break the pattern. But in this case, odd numbered months are supposed to be topics and workshops. We are in the 9th month, so that's odd, which means we're supposed to have a main talk and then a workshop. But in this case, we're having a main talk and BI news. It is also supposed to be hybrid. That is definitely today is definitely out of sequence or out of character. It should have been hybrid, but I'm in Sweden. Stefan is in the bush, and Cailin is brand new to this whole thing. So we didn't want to have a session in person and have Cailin on her own while we're all in different places. So we are online only today, and then in October we will fall back into the usual pattern, which is odd months, as I've just mentioned, should be hybrid, and then even months will always be online only. But the topics, I think we're going to probably change from next year. In fact, just on that, so I actually met with someone today from Microsoft. Okay, so I was going to say this at some point. I'm here in Sweden. I am absolutely overjoyed to be at the Fabric Conference, the European Fabric Conference. It started yesterday. This is day 2. I had to miss one of the sessions as I had to obviously come back and get ready for this user group event. But one of the cool things is in the big expo center, there's a big section called Ask the Experts, and Microsoft has a whole lot of people there. Obviously, it's Fabric related, so they've put it into different sections. So you can ask people about obviously Power BI or embedded or data science or data engineering or and the list goes on and on. There's about 20 different sort of clusters of people. So any kind of questions, which is really nice, and the Microsoft people are very, very approachable. So even if nothing else, just that ability is really, really cool. So if you are able to make it, to these kind of events in future, really consider that. This is the first European Fabric Conference. They had one earlier this year in Las Vegas for the US. Next year in March, or either March or April, it's going to be in Las Vegas again. And then they announced yesterday that the European one next year will be between the 15th and 18th of September, and it's in Vienna. So start thinking about that. Anyway, I mustn't get distracted about what I was trying to say, and that is, I did speak to one of the Microsoft ladies. I personally think she did about the best presentation between day 1 and day 2. It was all about Power BI and Copilot, and I've asked her to present at one of our upcoming user groups, and she's requested to do it in October. So in October, we'll have Microsoft persons speaking about Power BI and Copilot. So that's very exciting. What we'd already, as the organizers, had decided is that in October, I would also do a little summary of the Fabric conference, which is a daunting task because they give away a little notebook, and I have literally completed, in terms of my notes, more than half of the pages already. I'm on page 68, 69, 70, lots and lots of stuff, but really, really cool topics. One of the things, by the way, is dark mode. I don't know why everyone's so nuts about dark mode. So finally, it's gone live in Power BI desktop. Some of the other great things, just to mention, you can now edit direct lake semantic models from Power BI desktop. So you can create the direct lake model in the service, and then once it's created, you can do all the authoring that you normally would do in Power BI desktop for a local model. You can now do it directly connected to that direct lake, which is a wonderful thing. One of the things I like to use a lot is embed Power BI into PowerPoint. And that's obviously all live and dynamic. And one of the things they're going to bring out very, very soon is on specific data points in a graph, for instance, you can select a data point and actually annotate that data point, including a reference to the value. So you could say this is the peak of the last 12 months, and it is X, and X would obviously be updated based on the value of the data point. And you can basically put annotations in PowerPoint using Power BI content. So that's very cool. And then there's a ton of stuff on AI and Copilot, which is really cool. So that we'll cover next month. All right, so that is actually a very, very long introduction. And Cailin, we're about to come to you. So sorry to keep you in suspense. That's the 26th, that's today. And then next month, we're going to be doing Copilot and Power BI by the Microsoft lady, and then I'll just do a little bit more in detail about the FabCon news flashes. As always, if there is a volunteer to do a BI flash, please get hold of us. We would love to get you on our list of BI flash presenters. Remember, it doesn't have to be depth and very, very detailed. It's 5 to 10 minutes. And we'll put you on the list, and you can present October or November or January, February, March, whenever is suitable. But we're always looking for volunteers. All right, so with all of that said and done, I'm going to stop my sharing. In fact, I'll probably also stop my video and hand it over to Cailin, and I'll monitor the chat, Cailin. So you're welcome to go ahead. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the update. Thanks, everybody. And thank you so much for joining on a Thursday afternoon. I know it's probably been a long week, especially because there was a public holiday in between. It probably feels like it's Tuesday today, but actually it's Thursday. So thank you for taking some time out to attend. I want to make a disclaimer before I share my screen. This topic is called Pushing the Boundaries of Power BI, right? With specific focus on custom HTML and how we can use that within Power BI, as well as some visual layering. Now, I'm not an expert in HTML visuals in Power BI. I have just recently been working at a client where they really wanted to try and test the power of Power BI, and they had a very interesting use case. They really wanted to try and combine the feel of like a web application, but inside Power BI. So this gave us a lot of headaches of how we could create these visuals that were basically designed for web application type functionality and do so in Power BI. So please just keep that in mind. This is an introduction to what we tried and tested and how we kind of push the boundaries a little bit there in what we could do to meet these types of designs. So you might have a lot of questions along the way. Please feel free to ask me any of them. But please just note, there may be better ways of doing this. There may be different use cases for this. So this was a very specific way we were trying to apply it that was very niche to the client, but I thought it was quite a cool way of actually using these things in Power BI. So it may benefit you somewhere along the line. You may want to use it somewhere along the line. But as I said, there are many different ways that you could have approached this. So yeah, just bear that in mind. Cool. So first and foremost, for those of you who do not know, Power BI does have this functionality to actually import this custom visual, which is known as HTML content. And I have actually included it here in the pane for you to see what it typically would look like as you open it up. So what typically is required to actually use an HTML visual, like this custom visual, you need to actually create a measure that contains HTML code. So if you want to create any kind of picture or maybe a triangle or something like that for your application, you would need to do it in HTML code, create a measure, and then pull that into your HTML content, like visual itself. Now, there are some limitations with this specific visual. It's still quite in the development phase, so it does change quite frequently. And it does have limitations in terms of how you can use it, what amounts of data you can actually apply or supply to it. And that can become problematic. And this was something we experienced in the specific client project we worked on. And it actually made us try to think how we could use HTML code without the use of this visual. So I will post some material in the chat after the presentation of where you can actually go to create visuals using this specific custom visual that Power BI has. And it's a very nice video. It shows you a bunch of different things you can do within this specific context. But I'm going to show you a very different way of using HTML that's a bit unconventional. So yeah, please bear that in mind as well. So the first thing is I have actually created a little piece of HTML code. I will show you here in this measure called small triangle. It's quite self-explanatory. It's an SVG image that has a specific width, specific height, view box, and so on. And these might look a bit foreign to you, but you'll notice that there's some polygon points and these get plotted and filled. So the more you use HTML, the more this will become familiar to you. So if it does look a bit like jargon, please do not stress. There's a lot of material out there online for how to create these different kind of images and things like that. So if you're not sure, there's some great resources to look into. But this is just to create an image of a gray triangle that points upwards. So you'll see now what I'm going to do is just pull this triangle into this custom visual as a value, right? So now you can actually see there's my little triangle and it's this image. Okay, so that's kind of a typical way of using this HTML custom visual in Power BI. There's various different use cases. I have seen in instances where this actual HTML code was a lot more complex than the simple triangle that I'm showing you now, where, for example, employees would log into a specific report and they would actually want to see an image of themselves and next to that some information. And that would all be built in this one single visual, custom HTML, and that would be pulled into this visual. And that was quite a nice way of creating like a dynamic, personalized experience for the user. So that's one use case of this. But now what we kind of had the challenge of doing was we actually wanted to embed this within a matrix in some form. And what you could do is try and create an entire matrix from HTML code from scratch. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of headaches. So we were trying to see how can we use what Power BI already has with HTML embedded inside it. So I'm going to show you a little example here. I've got a very dummy data set. It's a few movies and some ratings over the last few months. It's very dummy data, so I'm sorry if it looks funny, but it should just give you a good idea of how this can be used, right? So the first thing is I'm going to create a little matrix. And I'm going to pull my movie name in and for a specific month of this year with some trend data. And now what I want to do is actually put in the actual values into this matrix but I want to do it in a way that shows that in an icon. So one of the kind of challenges we had in a design previously is certain data was required to be displayed in this pill-like format, right? Where the value would appear inside this little pill, and that pill would change colors depending on what the value represented or what threshold it fell into. And typically in Power BI, I'm sure you're all aware of being able to just change the color of the background to do that kind of thing. But now we were faced with this challenge of creating a pill. So we thought, okay, let's just go and create an HTML visual and a little pill that we could use. And I'm just going to show you this. It's going to look a bit strange for now. I'm going to make it quite big, but I'm going to filter it just for the sense of this data we're wanting to display. So I'm going to do it for 1 month and for 1 movie. And you'll see this pill looks really big, right? You can't even see that it's a pill, but it's basically a pill with the value for that specific month for that movie. And we were trying to figure out how could we get that inside here without actually creating the full table in HTML. So what we did instead was create some code, and I'll show you, it's a bit complex, but I will walk through this as well. We created some code. Just look at the top one here. This is an HTML visual. It's an SVG image that has certain features. It's got a height, it's got a width, it's got some angles to it, and it's got a color, font weight, and some full color. And this was how we were trying to create this pill shape, was through this specific SVG or HTML. So what we did instead was use the general features of a matrix and add our rating data as values. But instead, we want to actually go and conditionally format this with icons. So typically what we're doing now, right, is we're creating this icon, and you'll see here we don't really have this option of selecting an icon because now we're creating a specific value. We don't really want to do this. So if we were to just try and click rating, you'll see that doesn't really do anything for us. And that was a bit of a problem. So what we do instead is we actually select this pill, and we select it as an icon only. And now what you will see is that the pill starts to populate this table directly. So it's a bit small here. I'll zoom in, or we can actually go now and just change the value size. And as I do this, you'll start to see the values appearing in this pill type HTML that is now embedded inside this specific matrix. So this was really, really fantastic because it helped improve the development time that we had, but still created a very unique feel that the client was looking for with HTML customized visuals. And these visuals are quite easy to make as long as you know how to change the size and the width, and I can go through that as well. But this was kind of the idea that we were trying to achieve. So this pill code, let me jump into it just so you can see, is not that complicated. We have some variables. I just like putting these variables aside. It just makes the code a little bit more clean and neat to read. So if you go into the actual HTML code, what you're seeing here is actually the association with whatever variable we've put here. And this kind of just dictated how big this pill was and how it took up the space within that specific compartmentalized area that you have within the matrix. Something we did find is if you were to just create this visual, like I showed you with that arrow a bit earlier, if you were just to create that specific visual, it was huge. As you saw, it only showed you like a portion of it. And that's because the matrices within Power BI have a set number of pixels that are allocated in that little square associated with a value, or that cell, for lack of a better word. And as a result of that, we actually had to increase the size of these ratios from one another so that it would appear big enough within that little cell. And that's why you see in here it looks massive, but on the left it does not. So this was quite a nice way of really pushing the boundary that Power BI has. Instead of using the custom icons that they have within Power BI, you can actually go and do this. Create your own specific HTML and pass in values that you actually have from your data sets and create a really unique look and feel for the client. Cool, so that's one example. Before I go ahead, I just want to walk through how this code actually works. So I'm not going to teach you how HTML works holistically. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm not a boffin in HTML code, but it is relatively self-explanatory. In this case, you'll see that we have this SVG kind of external wrapper that we have here. And within that, we have various different elements. And then you'll see in this case, we actually have a rectangle. So what we're creating here is a rectangle of a certain height and width, as well as a specific kind of radius. So this RX that you see here is actually what creates the curves at the end of that rectangle. It just changes that kind of arc. So that is, we played around a little bit with this just to get that kind of structure that we were looking for. And then obviously there's the text element as well. So we have a rectangle, and inside that rectangle, we have the text, and that text actually takes in the value that we want. And that value is being called by our selected value for our movie rating data. So this is how that specific block of code is actually running, and it's creating that kind of visual, that HTML visual. What's nice with this is we could then customize this. Sorry, is there a question? No, cool. Feel free to jump in if there is one. But basically here, we wanted to know for the specific value, right? For the specific rating, for the specific movie that we're looking at, we wanted to change the color of that pill depending on certain criteria. So I just made some random criteria here. You could make this a bit more elaborate in your own use cases. But in this case, if your movie rating was above 90%, we wanted it to reflect as green. If it was above 80 but below 90, it needed to be yellow. And if it was less than 80, we wanted it to display as red. And this white little component here, what this is saying where we're looking for blank data, is just for all intents and purposes of displaying it here, we had trend data that didn't actually have a value assigned to it, and that allowed us to associate this color white. So if I have a look here, you'll see there's the trend column. If I just quickly open up the data on another table, and I saw movie data, date, month, you'll see there's this trend. And this trend is actually associated with nothing. And that's why it allowed us to customize it this way. This is just dummy data. You could make your data far more appropriate than what I've done here. This is just for visualization purposes. But when looking at the pill, that is why we had this here. So anything would be, anything below 80, but not blank would be red. And then when it comes to here, all we're doing is really saying if the color that's now been assigned based on your business rules is red, then print this image and populate it with your value that you want, your rating value. If it's not and it's green, do the same thing, but make this green. And what you have here is this fill. That is where that's actually changing in the code base here. So this fill is actually just changing the color of the pill throughout the code. Right. So that's just a very simple example of how you can actually use this. And it might look a bit strange, but this was an absolute game changer for us with the specific application we were trying to build, because we could actually improve the development time that we had to get this out and get it to look exactly how the client wanted us to, with this specific kind of visual. And we had a few others, and I'll show you that shortly. Cool. Is there any question up until this point that anybody has? Fabulous. Cool. So now I'm going to jump to a bit more of the custom visuals with this concept of visual layering. So in this case now, you'll see we've actually also embedded this trend, this arrow that we saw before. This is now actually embedding this within the same code that we had previously. We just added a little bit of logic. So if I open up the pill now, and you go right down to the bottom, you'll see I've actually got this final result where it says, okay, in the instance where our value is actually blank or it's associated with this column name of trend, we don't want to see the pill there. We actually want to see whether or not the trend is increasing or decreasing over the course of those months. And if it is increasing, we want the triangle to point upwards. If it's decreasing, we want the triangle to point downwards. So this is just an example of how this is actually being calculated. And it's the same logic as you saw before. So it's actually calling those triangle upward and triangle downward HTML measures. And if that's the case, then it will print those. Otherwise, it will print the poll. And in this case now, you can actually see this. For BIUG, it's printing everything where the column name is not trend as a poll with the associated value based on the conditional formatting that we wanted. And if it's not, it's actually showing you this changing trend, which is really nice functionality to have. What I do want to also show you is just how dynamic this can be as well. So I've got a very ugly looking scatter plot here below, but it's just to illustrate the power of this. So if I actually click frozen 2, it now still dynamically filters everything as it would before. The custom HTML visuals can have complexities when it comes to this type of functionality. So this was a major win to find that you can actually do this by just pushing the boundary of the existing visuals in Power BI. And also the same thing, if I were to click on a single data point for a single movie, it also filters everything as we're expecting it to. Cool. So now the point of layering. I'm not sure if many of you have actually worked with layering in Power BI. To be honest, it's quite a bit of a feature that kind of falls under the radar, but can be really, really helpful and extremely valuable in organizing how your visuals are being displayed and how the users will ultimately interact with those visuals. So if you don't know where this is, if you go into View, you'll see you have your little filter selection, which you can see over here, and your visualization section always comes up. But then there's this little selection pane here, and you'll see it says manage the visibility and layering order of objects in your report. So if you click this pane, this little thing will pop up, which is super valuable. And the more I add visuals to this, you'll start seeing them pop up that aren't labeled. I've just named these appropriately, but let's just add a card and add a second card. Blank card, for example. Can you see it starts to populate the selection order on the side here? You can then go and actually just name this something appropriate for the visual that you're creating. And it makes it a lot easier to manage what you're doing if you are going to be using layering in your visual creations. So I'm going to delete these cards now. And what I want you to pay attention to is this movie ratings group. If I click on this entire thing, you'll see what it actually selects. That represents this entire object that I've created. Inside this object are actually a series of other objects. May they be Power BI visuals or text fields or buttons. It doesn't really matter. You can add all of these things and group them into one specific object. So if I expand this, you'll actually see all of this information. So I've got a container at the bottom. This container just kind of holds it at the top, sorry, holds everything together. So if I hover over it, that's all that it is. It's just this funny little thing that kind of prevents anything clicking if you want to do it that way. I can also show you why this is important later. But now if I click on movie ratings, that's actually this title. So we could have used the same matrix visual that I used previously and just added a title directly on the visual. But maybe you want to add a picture to this, or maybe you want to customize your header entirely and it's not really available in the existing formatting that is available for that visual. You can do this. I mean, this is a very simple example, but it still has the same properties. You can still do the same things with the specific visual as you would normally. So I can change the color. I can do whatever I like to this header instead of actually creating my own header. So it's like a dynamic thing. This is a very simple use case. You could do way more fancy and fun things. This is just to illustrate what is possible in Power BI. So that's an example there. We've got movie ratings, and then the next layer is our actual matrix. And this is the matrix that we've been dealing with that contains HTML embedded code to create this functionality. So now if I actually wanted to go and add a header, I could still do the same thing. I could go and say, okay, actually I want to add a title, and there it pops up. But the title has very minimal functionality to edit it. You can't really make it as beautiful as you want, or maybe you want something very specific. This is quite limiting here. And that's why instead of doing that, we could actually create our own one at the top. But now what's really, really important with this layering is when you want to create something a bit unique and different. So in this instance, let's say it didn't really matter if I filtered, if I wanted to change the ordering of my columns, for example, then that's fine. When you actually publish this visual to the service, the user will be able to hover over the visual exactly as I'm doing now, and will be able to change the orientation. But something we experienced with our client was they didn't want the user to be able to touch the ordering. It needed to appear in a specific order because of the data and sensitivity of the data. It had to be displayed in the right order. And so what we did with this visual layering to remove this functionality, because that's a limitation with some of these visuals in Power BI, you can't actually remove that necessarily. We would cover this with a container, and we would make sure that that container went over exactly that portion of the code. So when you clicked it, you couldn't actually change anything with the ordering. So it seems a bit hacky, but in some situations, it's actually really beneficial and can be really useful. That's one example of the layering. The other example is something a bit different if you want to add a button. So I'm going to show you these little buttons. I'm going to move them across. They're just little arrows. Okay, they've got funny little names at this point. If I just select these buttons, I'm going to just move them across. Sorry, there we go. I'm just going to move the position of this horizontally to 650, just to move it up. Oh, not 350, 650. And maybe just move it up a little bit. So 105. Okay, maybe make it a bit further, 655. Okay, so now typically in Power BI, we have this functionality to drill through, right? If you have that option. So if you've got another page and you want to actually go through from the Barbie movie and you want to see more details on the Barbie movie, you can drill through directly. But now we can also customize this and create a button that actually links you to something else. And that's once again, this was to try and make Power BI very much look and work like an application and not have users trying to drill through. It feels a bit counterintuitive, which it was a little bit in this case, but it's just to show you the power of this. And in this instance, what you would want to do is you would want to layer these buttons on top of this visual and not at the bottom. If I put these visuals at the bottom here, I now no longer can click on them. So having them in this order made a massive difference to how we actually could utilize this visual. We could then also move this completely to the right. So let's maybe make this 670 as an example. And we could then go and cover this entire matrix with a container, which is just an empty square, basically, and only allow users to touch these. That would then prevent them from hovering. They wouldn't be able to filter. And I mean, it is a very specific and unique use case, but it does really help if you're wanting to limit certain interactions on visuals. So that's a bit on the navigation. You can also look at it from a tab order perspective. So this also just shows you the tab, like it's just a different way of displaying how these visuals are layered. But it does really help you organize your things a little bit better. And typically all of your visuals will appear like this in the selection layering. It's just how you want to layer them and group things that changes. So if I go to the landing page, you'll actually see now all these funny things I added are all part of my layering selection, but they're just not grouped into any reasonable or logical ordering, and they don't have an influence on each other. But you can use it like we did in this side or in this specific visual to make it really beneficial for how you actually allow the user to interact with this visual on the report. So it's quite customized, but once again, it pushes the boundaries a little bit. So if you're ever stuck and you're in a situation where there's a certain feature that's not quite behaving the way you want it to, there's something you want to change, maybe you want to add a picture to the top, maybe you want to add buttons, maybe you want to add specific backgrounds and then have a picture on top of it or the matrix on top of that background, you can do this all with this visual layering. And it does make it quite impactful and very unique to your own design. So if you think that there's no way of doing it in Power BI, try with HTML. You never know what's possible. And maybe try with this visual layering and how you interact with those visuals. Cool. I know this was a bit of a rushed session. I hope it was not too quick. But yeah, it's just trying to show you what the power of Power BI can actually be if you really think outside of the box. And it doesn't have to be so complex about going and getting these new visuals and getting really detailed in the code that you use. I mean, this triangle code is really not very complicated. It's just a set of polygon points that are filled together. Same thing with that. With this pill, it's a rectangle, really. That's all it is. So it's just pushing yourself a little bit and trying these things. There's a lot of these kinds of functionalities where you can embed them as or import them as an icon. You can also use visuals or images if you have that in your data set and pull that in. So it's just to show you just how much you can actually do with the existing visuals in Power BI if you just think a little bit creatively and out of the box. Awesome. Are there any questions? Okay, it doesn't look like there's any questions. So Sven, I think I might hand back over to you. But before I do that, if you do have any questions or if anyone wants to actually have this little Power BI model that I created, it's very basic, but if you want to have a look at it and play around and see how the code was used and try a few things on your own, I'm also very happy to share it with you. I know it was a bit of a dummy data example, but I'm very happy to send it to you if you want to, and you can see what creative things you can come up with as well in Power BI.
Well done, Cailin. I think that was magnificent. The presentation was tremendous. I thought it was very, very interesting, and you covered actually so many topics, in one presentation. So thank you. I actually always like to see how people solve practical problems with Power BI. I mean, we all know and love Power BI, but as you say, there's a challenge. Someone thinks about a workaround, and you've shared it now with the community. So that's wonderful. Excellent. Obviously, if people do have questions, continue to put them in the chat and so on. Right now, I am going to try and achieve what we couldn't achieve a few months ago, which is playing the video and audio loud enough that you can hear it. So I'm also now going to just turn my camera off, and I'm going to share Sia's news. But I just got to find the right thing quickly. So that's that one there. Share screen, share window. 1 second. Share window, share screen. May as well share the screen. That's not good. Oh, well, that's the user group, but I didn't mean to do that now. I have to stop sharing because I've got to get it with the sound settings. Share, where are those little add background, include sound. Bingo, there it is. Share screen. Okay. All right. So if I minimize all of that and maximize that, I'm just going to play the first 5 seconds. If someone can just tell me that you can hear it, then I'm going to start back again or whatever. So I'm going to push play.
Good evening and welcome to...
Good evening and welcome to... You got it.
Got it.
That is good news. Okay. All right. I'm handing back over to Sia now. I'm going to put myself on mute. In doing that, I hope the sound still comes through. But if it doesn't, just pop up and tell me.
This month's Power BI user group news and updates. Looking at the agenda item for this evening, we've got the intro, followed by the news, where we'll be looking at 2 news topics for this evening. One is the dark mode, and the second one is the NFC and the Power BI mobile apps updates. And then that will be followed by this evening's updates, which will be looking at the visual calculations updates and the visual level format strings. Those are in preview, and followed by the live edit of the semantic model in direct late mode in Power BI. And then lastly, we'll look at some useful links for this evening's news and updates. Starting with the intros, just to introduce myself, my name is Sia Zungu. I work at Sado Analytics as a tech lead for BI and data platforms. Those are just some of my details and my email address for those of you who would want to get in contact. Looking at the first news update for today, this is the dark mode being available now in the Power BI desktop app. So for some time now, a lot of us were actually looking forward to having this setting. It's one of those things we wanted like earlier on, but now they've rolled out a change. If you've recently opened Power BI with the September updates, you will notice that there's a pop-up that shows up, which gives you some options. The first being the legacy mode, which is the one that we've all known, which is the white background with some gray accents. Following that is the light mode, which is similar to the legacy mode that we've had, but with some updated styling. And then we've got the dark mode, which is the one that makes your background black or with dark accents. And then following that, it's the system default. So now basically that will be whatever you've got your Windows system default set as. Power BI will also take the same setting into account when you open up your desktop application. All right. Following that is the NFC technology and the Power BI mobile apps. So there's been an update that has been rolled out in the September update of the Power BI mobile app, which now allows you to have NFC tags that have access to either your reports or dashboards that you might have published, or to actually give access to workspace resources or the workspace itself, and some Power App support as well. This is one of those useful features, kind of like a quality of life type of feature, which allows you to now have tags, especially if you think about the example of people who work in like warehouses or stock management, inventory management in general. And you have certain locations within the warehouse where you might actually would like to get reports on how the movement of certain items is, so that you can also plan around inventory management and stock movement. So if you have these tags located in those areas and you have an NFC supported device, then you can actually scan those tags in order to get more information about that particular inventory item, how quickly it's moving, how long it's staying in your shelves, and those types of things. But obviously, you'd have to set that up beforehand. I do think it's quite a good improvement to have, and it would help, and I do see a lot of application for it as well. All right, following the news updates, we'll then be looking at some of the updates that also came into Power BI in terms of the improvements that are being rolled out, further improving the desktop experience. So the first article that we have on the update side is the visual calculation updates and the visual level format strings. This is one that I also covered in last month's news and updates as a demo, which is basically having those visual calculations that allow you to write measures that are limited to just a particular visual, and also just apply format strings to that particular measure, and that would only exist within the context of the visual in which you created it in. Since then, they have now made some slight improvements in that, unlike before where you needed to select the visual that you are interacting with or the visual that you would like to create the calculation on, and then go and select from the ribbon to enable visual calculations, it will now be on by default. So it basically saves you now that one step of having to enable it, in that now when you are on the visual, you also get the option to create visual level calculations from the jump. This also spills over to the format strings as well. I did showcase last week that you can have a custom format string in order to control that, but they've also improved it in that they've now allowed you to select some of the formats that are set for you, such as what we had on the ribbon when you're creating things like measures or calculated columns, and then it allows you to select from a drop-down the type of output that you would like it to be, whether it's an integer, a string, meaning text, or decimal number. You now also have that within the visual level format strings. So you'll get the drop down, and if you still can't find the format string that you're looking for within that list, then you can still use the custom format string that I also showcased last week. So it's good to see that they are making improvements as they go on these features, just to make it that much more easier for users to actually use and get accustomed to. All right, and the next on the update is the live edit of semantic models in direct link mode with Power BI Desktop. This is also another cool feature that has now been released, which allows someone who's using the Power BI Desktop app to edit live models, semantic models that are in direct link mode, which are in your Fabric workspace. So this was one of those features that you could do with the web editor if you are on the service, but it's now cool to just also have another way in which you can interact with that semantic model that's in a direct link mode. So now you can connect with Power BI Desktop, and what this will do is that on the instance or the instance of Power BI that you would have opened and connected to your semantic model in direct link mode, it will then on the left hand side remove those icons that you get for your reporting, your report view and your table view, and it will only leave the semantic model editor, which is where we normally go to create relationships and calculation groups and so forth. So this basically turns your file into almost like an analysis services editor kind of tool, which then allows you to further improve on the semantic model, which is in your direct link mode. And from there, you can still create relationships. You can also build measures, because the DEX query view is also there. So you are able to also still create measures and save them within that model directly to your semantic model. And that will pretty much be basically live. So as you're making changes in your desktop application, those are being saved into your live semantic model. And in this case, you also do get the save button for the file that you normally get. It gets grayed out because it does the auto saving for you in the background. So as you're working on it, it does create the auto save. So given that you can now do changes on your Power BI desktop app, like I said, I think it's one of those changes that's welcomed, because it does give you more than one way of working on your semantic model that's on a direct link mode. And from there, just to give some useful links in terms of where we found this evening's news and updates. These are just some of the places where I went to just get some information, but do visit some of these links to get more information and more detailed breakdown of some of the topics that were highlighted. There is a lot more that is covered in some of these areas, so I do encourage that. And with that, that brings us to this evening's end of the news and update section. I do hope you guys enjoy the rest of the user group, and yeah, till next time.